Debbie. And I just want to say a big thank you to Jill, because she's definitely one of the most supportive people on Twitter. I want to talk a little bit about multiple choice questions and how they're becoming an increasing part of my practice, and how I'm very much a believer in them and the way that they can improve instruction. I'm an English teacher, and if I probably thought about this a couple of years ago, I'd probably laugh, because I would have rejected it as being lacking in rigour, lacking any kind of detailed information. I've kind of really come full circle around that. It feels to me that assessment across subjects, but notably in my own subject, is a bit of a crossroads at the moment. And I've had two meetings this week. One was a cross-borough assessment meeting, looking at how we take forward assessment at Key Stage 3 and maybe what links that has to Key Stage 4. And I'm not here today to talk about what I think that assessment can look like, but what does surprise me at times is the way in which people confuse different aspects of assessment and what they think its purpose is actually for. And for me, it kind of has, there's two main things that we can consider, particularly amongst English and other like subjects. One of those is towards the right-hand spectrum, and that's looking at assessing things that are really specific, things that you've kind of taught, things that are particular aspects of domains at the end of a term, which I would like to move towards, but is really difficult and very time-consuming and very precise. The other thing, which I suppose was always my bugbear with levels, was around the nature of teaching aspects of skills, which is important in English, but also can be quite vague and imprecise. And I feel like this is the kind of landscape we need to consider. For me, another thing that muddies the water is the insistence on progress. Always demonstrating progress with the students you have, and usually in quite short bursts of time. And I think that sometimes the assessment that we have in class, that we use as teachers, sometimes is influenced by that curse of always being able to demonstrate progress. I'm not saying it's not important, but to always have that at the heart of things that you do might not be the right way forward. For me, I think multiple choice questions can form quite an important interim measure, quite an important instructional tool that can inform the things that you do and help you understand what it is that kids actually know, what it is that kids actually need to do in order to progress. And that, for me, as a classroom teacher, is things that are most important, most valuable, as well as obviously at the end of perhaps a sustained period, looking at the ideas of progress. Effective multiple choice questions, there's some people in here that blogged about this in the past. There are different ways of setting these up. And you need to make sure that in the items that you have, that you've carefully considered the different misconceptions that students might have around a particular topic, a particular idea, a particular focus. And that is incredibly time-consuming. I have spent a couple of hours, perhaps more, just designing 10 questions around advice and men, for example. But it's been incredibly enabling and enlightening for me, because I've had to think carefully, what are students likely to get wrong about X, Y, and Z? What are they likely to kind of need further instruction on? And I think that that input into the multiple choice earlier on pays huge dividends later on when you get the results back from what the kids actually do. I tend to use it in two main ways, and interestingly, pertinently, Joe Kirby wrote another blog about multiple choice questions this morning, and I know that he uses a lot of the multiple choice questions that he does around things like character, plot, settings, ideas and themes, things that are kind of, they're either right or they're kind of wrong, and he's trying to build up this knowledge base, which I think is incredibly important. And I do that too. I do it around lots of aspects of key terminology, things that I want the kids to actually know. So for example, in my A-level class at the moment, I've tracked around 50 words that I've introduced into my lessons, and incrementally I assess those through multiple choice questions. Partly to see if they can define it, they can spell it, they know it, but also to aid that retrieval process, which I think is really important. Just to keep bringing that terminology back to the table to make it absolutely explicit. But where I've had much more enlightening for me, and probably much more time-consuming, is looking around ideas of interpretation, analysis, and deduction. And it is, so I've been looking at, for example, how language is used in writers' techniques. And Leverage Leadership has a big chapter around multiple choice questions, which I urge you to look at if you have any kind of subjects around history, English, any subject like that where there's that kind of interpretive element. Because what I was surprised at is just how rigorous some of this material can actually be. So for me, what it does is it brings into sharp focus where your students are actually at. And I've got into the habit of doing these assessments every week. And kind of towards the end of that week, depending on the sequence where my classes are, I've been able to get a real sense of, as much as possible, what it is they actually got within that week, what it is they haven't. Now I realise that there's some degrees around performance and all those aspects of what is learning and how much does that stick. But certainly within the context of those few lessons that I've taught, I'm able to judge, have they picked that up? And if they haven't picked up in the short term, it's extremely unlikely, as far as I'm concerned, that it likely to happen in the long term. Tom Bolton, we were chatting about this earlier, last year he introduced me to Google Docs and to Google Forms, which probably, I'm the only person that probably that was not something that I practiced, but it's so quick and easy to design these assessments using Google Forms. And he introduced me to a program called Flubaroo, which you can load up into Google, and it marks these things incredibly easily and quickly, and gives you some real live data. And the kids love it, seeing up on the screen what they've got, what they've not got, and you can tell per kid, per question, where it is they've actually gone wrong. This isn't one of my best efforts, but it was one that I could find quickly. This is more one of the simpler ones I'm doing at the moment with A-Level, The Tempest. So just for the opening 5 minutes, we're lucky enough to have a suite of iPads, so I can book those, and the kids can answer some questions and things that I've just gone through last lesson, and I can get an accurate impression of whether they've done that. Then, with my Year 11 class, I can mark some of the things that they've done. And it's so quick and easy to use. Now, that doesn't mean I want it to replace my other forms of marking, the things that are more sustained, but I see this very much as being part of something that I can do week in, week out, giving me that information to allow me to adapt my instruction and improve the things that I want to do. So, it's about, for me, assessment has two purposes. One, to evaluate over a decent stretch of time, and we could argue what that is, whether kids have made progress, and I think we'd all agree that's important, but more important is I want to use assessment within the classroom to see what it is that kids are doing week in, week out. Partly as acquisition of memory, partly for me to be guided what it is I actually need to do next, my next steps. And I think maybe later on in the year, once the exam season's out of the way, and there's a lot of people doing things around that, I would like to think about how we could maybe open source multiple choice questions and a real bunch of colleagues around a shared set of principles gathering information and building up databases of decent, well-established multiple choice questions, because they take so long to do, but they have such rich returns. And so that's something I think I'm likely to come across later on in the year. Thank you.